very high pressure environments through lots of what we thought at the time were big crises, and actually in hindsight were quite small in comparison to a global pandemic. But we lived through things like SARS and MERS when I worked at Reckitt Benckiser looking after Dettol and Lemsip and things like that, which was all incredibly high pressure. And also an annual flu season, which was enormously high pressure to try and keep everybody in stock of all of those kind of products as well. I worked my way up through the ranks there and got promoted to a supply chain director role at the grand old age of 29, which was, again, incredibly high pressure from a personal kind of point of view, and actually really failed in that role. At which point I made the decision to move to a different business. I moved to Danone, I guess with my tail between my legs a little bit. And at the time I was given a coach and a mentor and a massive amount of leadership training, which I feel put me back together really and filled in a lot of the gaps that I had in terms of me as a leader, which was absolutely incredible. And it really opened up a huge amount for me in terms of what leadership means and the benefits of great leadership in business. Which took us through something which we called the China baby milk crisis, because when I worked at Danone, I worked on the Aptamil and Cow and Gate brands at the time that there was a huge issue in China with baby milk, where the government produced formula, which was pretty much the only thing on offer, was found to be cut with melamine, which is a type of plastic, and lots of babies in China got very poorly. And all of a sudden, overnight, European baby milk became a hugely valuable commodity in China. And I led our supply chain team through that as well, which was huge at the time. We won lots of awards for our leadership approach at Danone. And I guess that's what kind of made me think that leadership was a space that I wanted to work in. Went off to be supply chain director for another business called Omega Pharma that grew from 4 people to 120 people in the time between me being interviewed there and me leaving 2 years later, which was a huge growth trajectory, and has, I guess, led me into working with the kind of businesses I do, which are very, very fast growth businesses, which are growing teams very quickly. At the end of my journey there, I decided I wanted to go off and do coaching instead of supply chain directorship. At the time when my boss said, we've got 120 people now, you should really be focusing on supply chain much more than you are on leadership and development. And I said, I think I'll go and do the other actually. And I went off and trained at Henley Business School as an executive coach. And here I am talking to you today. I've been running my own business for nearly 5 years now, and I work with lots of very fast growth businesses who are usually moving, I guess, from the late stage startup phase into the scaling business phase. So businesses that are growing teams quickly and leaders who are often facing challenges for the first time. So it's either their first very senior role or their first time leading the whole show, and that comes with its own challenges. And I guess that's why, in terms of the coronavirus challenge, certainly I feel qualified to talk about that from a leadership point of view, because the challenge is bigger, but the way that you approach it ultimately is the same, because it's all about change. So that's me, and I'm going to share some slides now. Hopefully this will work. Fingers crossed. Michelle and I have checked it, but not with this many people on the call. Yay! Oh no, present. Here we go. Right, so I like to put photos in my presentations because I think it makes it all look a lot prettier. And I was thinking of a metaphor for the challenge that we're all facing at the moment. And I thought, we're all cactuses, right? Because we're all trying to thrive in the most inhospitable of environments. And all of the photos I found initially of cactuses were very phallic, which I thought was probably not the right thing to be presenting in a women's chapter presentation. And then I came across this, which was a gorgeous quote surrounded by cactuses. And it says, we must be willing to give up the life we've planned so that we can live the life that's waiting for us. And I think that's so true of where we're at the moment, and where I think we need to be thinking. We need to be thinking of how we can make the most of this opportunity, and how we can give up what our plans were for at least the short-term future. And so hopefully today I will give you some tools to really grab hold of the life that's waiting for you, or the different plan that's waiting for you, at least in terms of how you move forward. But I just thought it was really pertinent, and surrounded by the lovely metaphor that I wanted to share as well. So what are we all going through? I shared this on LinkedIn last week and got an amazing response. I got a trending post, which is exciting. But what we're going through at the moment is a transition. We're going through change. We're moving from the old way to the new way. And when we're faced with change, and I think something we probably underestimate, is that we go through a very chaotic period between that old way, which is the way we're used to, and the new way, which is how we function relating to that change. And we're all in that chaotic period at the moment. And what I'm hoping to do today is give you some tools to move you through that chaotic period and out of the other side. But what's that chaos? Where does it come from? Well, it comes from a natural response to change. And this is called the Kübler-Ross change curve. And what it says is that when we're faced with change, initially we're quite optimistic. We're probably not that interested in the detail. We are probably quite confident in our skills to deal with change, and we think we'll be fine usually. And your teams, if you have teams, are probably feeling the same way at this point, quite optimistic. What happens next is, once reality hits and we start to try and deal with that change, we start to become quite uncertain, and we experience uncertainty in relation to that reality. And I think in the last week, certainly, I have seen and spoken to lots of people that are starting to slide down the left-hand side of this curve. So first of all, we experience uncertainty. Then we experience a loss of confidence. We think, I'm not up for this challenge at all. I prefer things to stay the way they were. And I think I'm probably not alone in really believing that I'd prefer if things had stayed the way they were. But hey, we lose confidence in our abilities and our skills to deal with the challenge ahead. And what that then leads to is anxiety. So we start to feel quite nervous in relation to how things are going to progress. And what comes next is chaos. We really move into this chaotic state. We don't know how to decision make anymore. We're not sure how to prioritize. We reach the end of every day feeling like we don't know what we've achieved. We struggle to focus. I was just talking to Michelle about this. Momentum and kind of getting things done and actually getting to our to-do list is really hard when we're at this stage. And it feels very chaotic, and it's hugely de-energizing. What comes next, and what I'm hoping really to take you through when I talked about a group coaching session today, is what comes next is curiosity. So when we start to become curious about how we can make this change work for us, we start to come up the other side of this curve. We start to feel a little bit more positive, and we see some green shoots. What comes next, once we've got curious, is acceptance. We start to accept the change for what it is. Then we start to engage with it. We start to actually do the things that take us through to that next stage. And then finally comes enjoyment. That's us moving through out of the chaos into that new way. So that's the change curve that we're all on at the moment. I think most of us are somewhere around the bottom probably at the moment. I guess me doing this webinar is me getting curious about how I can engage with the change and moving forward. And hopefully you'll come along with me today. Come on, slides. Right. So what do we need to move forward? We need two things. We need clarity and strength. And if you don't have a notepad with you at the moment and a pen or paper, I would encourage you to grab one, because this is where you start to do some of the thinking. So to move forward, we need two things, clarity and strength. And first of all, we're going to talk about clarity. So for me, this sense of clarity comes from two things, and that's being extremely clear on your core purpose and your, in this context, your 3 to 5 year vision. So I want you to take a piece of paper and write down what your core purpose is. In relation to the coronavirus crisis, I might be wrong, and let me know if I'm wrong in chat. And Michelle, can you shout up, because I can't see the chat at the moment. But if anybody disagrees with this statement, I don't think your core purpose will have changed fundamentally in relation to the coronavirus crisis. What you do with that core purpose may have changed, but I want you to reconnect with what that purpose is. Why do you do what you do? And I want you to write that down. And then secondly, what is your 3 to 5 year vision? So my core purpose is to help as many businesses succeed through fantastic leadership as I possibly can. 9 out of 10 businesses in this country don't make it to the 5 year mark. And in a recent study, I think it was something like 75% of those businesses cited leadership skills gaps as being one of the main reasons they felt that they didn't succeed. That's enormous. And my core purpose relates to that. My 3 to 5 year vision is to have a leadership development consultancy that specializes in working with those businesses to give them a greater chance of success. Neither of those things have changed. What this should give you, this purpose and vision and this clarity and reconnecting with those things, is a chorus that's in your head. It should be like a catchy song that you can't get out of your head. It should be the absolute one thing that you think about with every decision that you make, every priority, every conversation you have with your team. It should be based on these two things. And if you've ever done any work on the science of marginal gains with Dave Brailsford, when he talks about, does it make the bike go faster? Their core purpose was to win races, and their 3 to 5 year vision was to be the best cycling team in the world. And they didn't do anything that didn't make their bikes go faster, because that chorus was running around their head. They used it for every decision, every priority. You can see there's a chat. No. So, oh, I didn't mean to do that. Has everybody got that written down? I hope so. I'm just going to keep moving forward. Okay. So secondly, as well as that clarity, you need strength. So this chaos, this mad time we're going through, as I said earlier, is hugely de-energizing. It's exhausting, and so many people have contacted me to say they are like, how do they deal with this tiredness, these waves of tiredness that keep coming over them? And in my view, the key thing we need is momentum. We need to start doing again, and to do that we need strength. And I believe that strength comes from a combination of 3 things: courage, hope, and resilience. And where those 3 things meet, that's where we find our strength. So courage, firstly, is the ability to find strength in the face of adversity. Definitely not alone in thinking that this situation that we're all in at the moment is probably some of the biggest adversity we've ever faced, certainly as a group. And lots of people will have been through significant adversity individually, but on the scale that we're seeing it at the moment, this is enormous. And so it's kind of every conversation we're having, every bit of social media, every news story we're seeing, we're being flooded by this. So finding strength in the face of adversity is really important. So back to finding our own kind of answers for things. In order to find strength in the face of adversity, I want you first of all to think about where you feel most strong. Where do you feel that you have strength at the moment? You will have some, I hope. Let me think of an example. Where do I feel most strong? I feel most strong in one-to-one coaching sessions. So the ones I'm having at the moment, I know that they are a huge source of strength to me and my clients. So that's where I feel real strength. I also feel strength at the moment when I reflect on how I am as a mum, because I'm around a lot more than I was because my kids are at home, and so am I. So I feel very strong there, and those are both places that I'm getting strength from. And where do you feel you're lacking strength? Because it can be really, really important to think about the gaps as well. So when I work with people, we think about what their vision is. We break it down into smaller steps. We'll talk about that in a minute. But then we think about what they have in relation to that challenge and where they feel they are lacking in relation to that challenge. So we expose some of the gaps. So it's really important for you to think about where you're lacking strength at the moment. So if you write that down as well. And then think about what you need to find the strength to face up to. So what might you be not facing up to at the moment? I think probably if I were to use an example from my own work at the moment, I think the thing that I am struggling to face up to is that I almost don't dare think about the next 6 months. If I think about a really, really great example of a client of mine that has found the strength to face up to something, they have decided that their forecast for the next 12 months in terms of revenue is 0. So they've faced up to the fact that they may not make any money in the next 12 months, and they've made a whole rake of decisions based on that. It's helped them, finding the strength to face up to that one thing has helped them to move forward on lots of decisions. If they do start to make revenue in the next 12 months, then that's a bonus, but they've really faced up to that. And then finally, think about what you have to give up in order to move forward. So when you think about that model between the old way and the new way, there might be things that are pulling you back to the old way, that are kind of anchoring you to that old way, that are stopping you from moving forward to that new way, that are hindering you. So what do you need to give up to move forward? It might be a vision of how things were going to be. It might be that you're kind of clinging on to that sort of victim mentality of woe is me, this is all happening to me. Sometimes we wrap that around ourselves like a comfort blanket. Think about what you need to give up in order to move forward. And I want you to leave it here on this call when we come off the call, whatever it is. Okay. Hopefully you're all there and you've got some things written down for that. We'll move on to hope. Let me just move this chat box out of the way because I've lost my arrows. Ooh. Right, hope. Hope is an expectation of positive outcomes. Somebody that I know wrote an amazing article on LinkedIn yesterday all about hope. She's Chief Innovation Officer for an agency called InOcean. And she wrote about hope being the currency of innovators. And you're all part of the women's chapter, which probably means you're all entrepreneurs or have a really entrepreneurial spirit. And in order to be an entrepreneur, you need hope. In order to innovate, you need hope, because you hope that your idea will work, or that people will buy your thing, or that people will respond to your ideas, or that people will engage with your social media. Hopefulness is the currency of entrepreneurialism and innovation. And it's one thing that we absolutely need at the moment, an expectation of positive outcomes. So what I want you all to do is think about the most positive outcome you could hope for. Because I think what we're all afraid to do at the moment is think about what could happen positively. We're all kind of waiting to see. But actually thinking about a positive outcome helps to pull you through to that new way. It's okay to plan for a negative outcome. It's okay to think about the risks, but I want you all to think about a positive outcome that you could hope for. And then think about, if you planned based on that outcome, instead of all of the negative things that may happen, what would you do differently? What decisions would you make differently? What conversations would you have with your team, your customers, your suppliers? What else would you put out there differently? And then finally, think about where you need to show up to give yourself the best chance of that outcome. So one of the ladies in my mastermind, she's called Emmy Faust. She's really worth following on social media. She puts out a daily podcast. She had completely stopped doing her podcast in the face of all of this crisis. And she talked yesterday brilliantly on LinkedIn about the fact that she needs to be back on that podcast, because she's realized the people that matter most to her audience, need to hear what she's got to say at the moment. And she's worked out that she needs to show up there in order to give herself the best chance of the outcome she wants, which is helping as many people as possible. So what can you do? Where can you show up to give yourself the best chance of that positive outcome that you've written down in the first answer? Okay. And finally, resilience. Resilience is the ability to respond positively in the face of adversity. Positive emotions are fuel for resilience. They are what is going to get you through that chaos. So what can you do today to foster positive emotion? And I want you to write down one thing against each of these headers. So gratitude, what can you be grateful for? Who can you connect with today that will make you feel positive? Is it somebody that you've wanted to reach out to for a while? Is it somebody that you want to thank for some amazing content they're putting out there, an article maybe? Who do you want to connect with and say hi or thanks, or haven't spoken to you for a while? Where can you show compassion? Actually demonstrating positivity towards other people gives us an enormous sense of warmth, and warmth is energy. So where can you demonstrate compassion? Where can you reconnect with a sense of purpose? So although we've talked about core purpose for the business, you will have an innate sense of purpose as well that goes beyond that, potentially. So sense of purpose as a mother, as a wife, as a carer. Maybe you're buying shopping for a neighbour at the moment. How can you really connect with what you're doing there and tap into that sense of purpose to release the positivity in there to give you that fuel, that energy to keep you going? Who can you collaborate with potentially? I'm collaborating with Michelle today on this webinar. It gives me an enormous sense of positive energy, and I've loved writing this presentation. I collaborate with my mastermind group. I collaborate with a coaching group. I get a huge amount of energy from collaboration. And really that's been something that's got me through a lot of this. So who can you collaborate with? And where can you find physical resilience? So I don't know if you're all doing Joe Wicks. I certainly am. We're also walking as much as we possibly can. Yoga, a friend of mine runs a yoga session at 5:30 every Tuesday for friends and family. I've been doing that online. Where can you find physical resilience? Because that's an enormous part of this, enormous part of having enough energy to get through. So write down one thing against each of those. And by doing those three things, you will hopefully already have a sense of feeling stronger in terms of facing the challenge and getting through to that new way. And so what I'm going to ask you to do is think about the first step you can take. So I talk about momentum a lot with my clients, and we think about creating a consistent sense of momentum. Consistent momentum is the way to achieve big things. And for me, the bigger the challenge, the smaller the steps we need to break it down into. So I want you to think about the first step you can take, something that you can do today to get you back in the game. And then in relation to that step, I want you to think about what you already have. So what do I have? It might be something that you've picked up in the last three exercises. What do I already have that's going to get me through? What do I know? Or what skills do I have? What resources do I have? Maybe you've got somebody in your team that knows how to do this one thing really well. What do you have that will help you to take this step? Well-planned steps that are broken down and really well thought through are the most likely to happen. So once you've thought about what you do have, then we're going to think about the gaps. What do I need? Who do I need? So where do I need help from? and how do I do it? And I want you to think about that, and use that model potentially with every single step you plan to take, because the more you break it down, the more likely you are to do it. Otherwise, these things stay on your to-do list as massive, great big things that you never ever get to. Breaking them down into tiny little steps really helps you to see them as smaller, basically, and more achievable, and you can go around like Pac-Man and eat them all up and get them done. Okay, so hopefully you've all got a step that you can take today. The next, why do my slides keep freezing? Sorry, guys. I just wanted to talk finally, I think I've got 3 slides left, I'll be quick, about the things that can get in the way. So this is a great model to help you with your focus. So once you've started on that journey, you're moving from the old way to the new way, you're going through that chaos, you've got all this strength, you've got major clarity about what the new way looks like and what it's about. There's some things that could really come and sideswipe you, completely knock you out of the park. So I've seen this model quite a few times on LinkedIn in the last week, and I've used it with loads of my clients as well. So this is a way of really regaining focus. So what I want you to focus on is only the things that you can control. This helps you to really get back in the game and stop worrying about the things you can't control. So things you can control are how you respond to things. It's about responding, not reacting. The things you can control are how you prioritize, how you decision make, the conversations you have with your team. It's the way you show up for both your job, your family, the people around you, your customers, your clients. You can control all of those things. You are in control of all of that. And through the things that you can control, fall out the things that you can influence. So just in terms of customers, the things you can control are how you show up. That will ultimately influence how your customers feel about you. The things you can control in terms of decision making, the decisions that you make will influence the things that will happen. And then outside of those 2 circles is everything else. Everything else, like the coronavirus death rate, like whether Boris Johnson will come out of intensive care, like how people will react to the Easter weekend. All of those things, not worth worrying about. That's a little insight into where my brain's at, isn't it? Those are the things that I'm currently focusing on, not focusing on. But leave them where they are. Just allow yourself not to think of those things, to be really ruthless in terms of only focusing on the things you can control. And it really helps to write some of this stuff down, actually. Just draw these circles, and when you start to drift and you start to worry about stuff and you start to go back up the wrong side of that curve into anxiety, loss of confidence, just write down some of the things that you are trying to control or influence that you can't. Okay. Last 2 models, I just wanted to talk about mindset a little bit. So I use this an enormous amount for myself, and I used to use it a lot with my team as well. It's called the prisoner, passenger, player model. And when I showed it to my husband last night, he was like, player. Everyone's going to laugh at that. So if you're having a little laugh at the word player, then you have the same sense of humor as Thomas Morley. So first of all, we've got prisoner, and I think we've probably all fallen into this prisoner mode in the last couple of weeks. It's where you feel trapped. You take no responsibility. You're kind of like, oh, this is out of my control. Can't do anything about it. It's awful. Woe is me. And you wait. You just go into waiting mode. You're not in doing mode at all. And it's not a good place to be. It's really, really, it's small thinking. It's really, really tough. It's not a nice place to be at all. And you will see that some of your team might be here at the moment. The middle one is passenger, and that's really passive. That's somebody that's doing enough to get by, needs to be reminded to do stuff, passive and less pushed, not really like in the game. Also not a great place to be, slightly more engaged than prisoner, not feeling trapped, not looking for the door, but only doing the bare minimum. And hopefully with what I've given you today, you'll all have exactly what you need to be in this player space, because that's somebody that is on the field, driving the agenda, just knows where the ball's going to be when it gets thrown, taking risks, active all the time, constantly thinking about how they can find the next opportunity, how they can make the most of the opportunities at hand, really, really pushing to win. And that is where we all need to think of ourselves. So next time you find yourself with that sort of stinking thinking, as I've heard people calling it, think about how you can move back into player mode. And then finally, I wanted to share, hopefully some of these last few things will just kind of resonate with different people and give you a little bit of a kind of filter to put some of your thoughts through. Finally, I wanted to share this concept of winning attitude. My coach that I mentioned at Danone, who basically put me back together after my awful experience in Benke's Island, was the ex-sports psychologist for Bath Rugby, and he brought a lot of stuff from the sports world into his coaching, and he taught me this thing called winning attitude, and he talked about three things. One is no excuses, only choices. We just don't make excuses to ourselves if we have a winning attitude. We only make choices. We have chosen the way we feel. We have chosen to prioritize one thing over another. The greatest example of this for me is if you're late for a meeting, it's not I was late because of the train, or I was late because something happened. I was late because I decided not to leave early enough, or I decided not to plan the night before my route. It can be easy to think with this way of thinking that it puts too much responsibility on you, but actually it puts you straight back in control, and it's a really great way of thinking. Secondly, I do what I say I will do. For me, this was a game changer. I do what I say I will do. I only ever agree to things that I know I can do now. I used to agree to do absolutely everything and then prioritize later down the line and let people down. Really flaky, not very nice, gave people the wrong message about how important they were to me. Now I only do what I say I will do with regards to everything, and it really changes the game for you. And then finally, ruthless focus on the important few. So pick a few things to do and focus on them ruthlessly. Make sure they're the right things, but only focus on those, and that will give you all the prioritization and all the decision-making framework you need. It's not complicated. And I just wanted to leave you with this quote, really, before we move to questions, and that's: life is not what it's supposed to be, it's what it is. The way you cope with it is what makes the difference. You are in control of how you cope with everything, and your team will be looking to you to lead how they cope. And literally everything you do is leadership. Every conversation you have, the way you walk into a room, every email you send, every decision you make, every piece of prioritization you do is leadership. And the way you cope is what makes the difference to how you feel and how your team feel. And that's the end of my slides. And I'm going to put it over to you for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rebecca. That was amazing. I've been feverishly writing.
Have you?
Does anyone have any questions? You can all unmute yourselves if you need to. And there is also a function here where you can raise a hand if you would like to. So I'm keeping an eye on that. But otherwise, feel free to type them in the chat box and I can either read them out or can you see the chat box, Rebecca?
Yeah, I can.
Okay.
I was wondering if it had. I think I had a delay from before because you were reading things out that I couldn't see.
No, I can see you now. Does anyone have any questions? No.
Everybody's still writing, hopefully.
Do you have any, Rebecca, I've got a question. For those that have team members, any recommendations for little exercises or things that people can do, especially remotely, to motivate their teams, to move them through the prisoner passenger player cycle?
The one thing that I used to do when we had massive change projects on in my old role was get people to mark where they are on that change curve.
Okay.
So kind of explaining to people how it works and get them to talk to you. It helps them to open up about kind of where they are and how they're feeling. And it's a great conversation starter. Because it can be, I think, when you're dealing with a change like this, I think people all feel like they have to be really upbeat, and actually opening up and talking to them about the fact that this is a natural reaction to change and they might be feeling some of these things allows them to be more open about how they're feeling. But you can also show them that there's light at the end of the tunnel, right? And you can help them in terms of curiosity. You can ask them questions to get them to open up, to demonstrate curiosity.
Okay, great. I've got a question here. It's from Lynette. What processes do you go through to identify your core purpose and vision?
This is fascinating, actually, because I'm working with somebody at the moment on their core purpose, and we've both found it really hard to land on his core purpose, because I think if you don't already know it, a lot of the kind of models out there, even Simon Sinek's why, he assumes you already know it, right? He assumes that you wake up every morning with this really strong sense of purpose. And if you don't, it can be really difficult to get to. But what I would say is that I think that most people do know what it is. It's whether you are either admitting it to yourself at the moment or whether you see a kind of practical application for it is probably what's missing. So I think the place to start is to get to think about what gets you up in the morning. What do you enjoy most about what you do? What is it that makes you feel that energy and that warmth in relation to what you do? Because those are the things that you can start to tap into, and then ask yourself, there's a really great exercise called the 7 or 5, depending on how kind of far you want to go with it, but 5 whys. So if you think about like what gives you that warmth, what gives you that sense of fulfillment, and then ask yourself why. And then when you find that the answer to that why, then you keep going and you kind of unpack the layers of why, and you will get to that kind of nub of what it is that makes you feel great about that thing that makes you feel good. There's a brilliant Lewis Howes podcast called School of Greatness, and he covers that 5 whys in one of his we used to use it in the factory to find out the root cause of issues but he covers it actually in relation to finding your core purpose. Lynette, I'll try and send you the episode if I can find it.
Yeah, or if you ping it over to me, I can always include it in the follow-up email to everyone.
Yeah.
Helpful.
But that will get you to your core purpose, and then you can go from there.
Cool. I think because we've both done some work with Lindsay Boyd, Rebecca, and she also has this exercise. It's really uncomfortable to start with, but it's thinking about what you want to be famous for, even if you don't want to be famous. What would the thing be that you would be famous for? Would it be doing something, or in connecting people, inspiring, things like that? And it's a really uncomfortable exercise when you first start thinking about it, but it's you eventually do get to that point of that's what my purpose is.
Yeah, absolutely.
You sort of build your 10-second thing around that. Why, what do you want to be known for and why?
Yeah, exactly. It isn't comfortable because it can be difficult to kind of face up to what it is you really believe in that space. It's quite interesting.
Okay, I've got another question here. I don't know if you can see the chat box, but it says Alex
Morley.
wants to know, I want to know what it is, in your opinion, the most common mistake people make in their day-to-day leadership, excluding the current situation.
Oh my God. It's absolutely one thing, time and time and time again, and it's not sharing their vision clearly or widely enough. Vision, values, that kind of thing. Values are quite often a page on a website or something in a handbook. Vision is, and actually this is what really did it for me in the end, in terms of knowing that this was what I wanted to do, is I got to a point when I was at Amiga Pharma where I really, really helped our GM to break down his vision into something that the business could really get behind. And I think, although we've talked a lot today about self-leadership and getting clear for yourself on what your vision is, it's absolutely imperative that you make that clear to the business and make it clear to each person in the business how that relates to them. Because when I was at Amiga Pharma, our GM was called Neil, and he had this number that he wanted to get to in 3 years' time. He wanted to hit the 200 million mark turnover, and everybody called it Neil's number. No, it was totally abstract to everybody. And he used to stand up at the front of the room fortnightly and do this all hands meeting and talk about 200 million. And everyone was really glad for him that he wanted to hit this number. No, it didn't relate to any of us. And what I helped him to do was break it down and really be able to talk about why we wanted to hit it, what it meant for everybody, what everybody was going to get when we hit it, and then break it down by function in terms of what they needed to do to hit that number. And it was different for everybody, right? It was different for finance because they needed to get the right cash flow, different for supply chain because we needed to hit the right availability and cost to hit that number. It was different for sales, it was different for marketing. And when we started breaking it down and taking the layers apart, we could get really forensic about what it meant for each department. And I think that's probably quite a big example for a big team. But the biggest leadership mistake I see is that there's a too big a gap between what the person at the front of the business has in mind for what that business is and what they're all doing and what the rest of the team think they're aiming for. So that's the biggest day-to-day leadership mistake. And I think, taking that Dave Brailsford model of does it make the bike go faster, if you can get everybody in the business repeating that same chorus or that same phrase and making every decision at their desks when you're not there from the point of view of what you're trying to achieve as a business, then you've nailed it. Hopefully that answers your question, Alex.
Brilliant. Anyone else? Okay, I have one. How would you recommend that people deal with generational gaps in their teams at the moment? Because obviously, I wouldn't know where to start really, but I think this situation, yes, there are things that are definitely uniting us in the way that we feel. But I think it does feel different for different generations because there's assumption, I think, by younger people that the older people have been through something like this before or experienced something similar. I mean, how would you advise people to manage the communication to their team in that sense?
That's a really interesting question. I do a lot of work with businesses like Stipsmith, for example, where they've got an incredibly young team relative to what you would expect for a business of their kind of stature and caliber. They've like some of the directors are in their early 30s, late 20s actually in some cases, and it's a very, very young team, and they're managing people that are even younger than them, and I feel like a dinosaur given I'm only 40. And I think I have that challenge, Michelle, with the sort of age differential, even with the coaching challenge, because obviously I'm going in and giving advice. And I think really the thing to go back to is our general hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that we all need the same basic things. And so as long as you can provide those actually in whatever context, I think you're providing the right things, and then how people relate to that is kind of up to them. So as long as you're providing security, like they know what's going on They know where the business is heading. They know what you're doing about it. As long as you're providing that security at the very base of that hierarchy, then I think actually in relation to coronavirus, then you're providing a lot more than, I think a lot more than a lot of people are at the moment, because I think a lot of people are sort of, a lot of leaders are moving into that wait and see mode, which is really hard for anybody reporting into you or looking to you for direction. So I think even being able to say to your team, I don't know the answer at the moment. But you can provide security by saying, but I'll talk to you when I do know, or you can always ask me any questions that you have, or here's what I do know, and here's how the next kind of 3 weeks are going to pan out, and we'll talk again then. You know, you're providing that level of security, that basic security that somebody needs. And then people need kind of a sense of belonging. So helping, I put out a working from home guide, how to lead a team from home, continuing to kind of get the team together to give them that sense of belonging, because we've all lost that sense of going into the office today. Then that's another way of providing one of those basic needs. And then kind of the top of that pyramid is self-actualization, which I don't think any of us are going to achieve at the moment, but helping people to see how they're still developing through this crisis and what they're learning, and helping them to reflect can still help them to feel like they're moving forward through this. And then I think actually taking it down to that most basic need takes away some of the generational differences and shows that you know what their needs are, which is, people just want to be heard a lot of the time. They just want to know you care.
Iris has a question here. She says she has a general question about how to effectively manage senior employees who are much older than her. And she wondered if you had some suggestions in that space. So I guess kind of the flip side of what I'd asked earlier.
How to manage. I'm helping somebody with this at the moment, actually. And I think actually, yeah, I've done it in, you know, in logistics world. I was this kind of, in supply chain world, I was this fast tracked, jumped up graduate managing people that had been in the business 25 years, 30 years, 35 years, 40 sometimes. And it's not easy, Iris, you have my sympathy. I think similar answer to what I gave to Michelle, really, which is understanding people's most basic needs. I think steering away from being in any way patronizing. And the one thing that I find unlocks the vast majority of leadership relationships is learning as a leader to be an active listener. Loads of stuff online about active listening. But what we kind of sometimes fall into, the trap that we fall into in terms of managing people, especially more senior people, is to try and prove how much we know, to prove how good a leader we are, so that they can't undermine us, and they're not, you know, they know they're in safe hands. It's like completely not the way to go. I think actually learning to be a really strong listener in that space is the best way to build rapport. I'm already drawing the relationship triangle, but that's another kind of model that we haven't gone through today. But Google relationship triangle, again, you'll find out a bit more about that. But active listening, I would suggest, would be a key to unlocking those relationships and getting really good at managing senior employees. Listen to what they're saying, ask lots of questions, ask a question about how they've just answered the question, watch for body language, be really, really open as a leader, and help them to help you learn, because they will learn. They will, if they're senior and they've been there a lot longer and they're older, they'll know a lot more than you do about a lot of things, and you need to give them space to demonstrate that, and you'll get them on side.
Brilliant. Cool. Well, I think we're almost at the end. I don't know, was there any last questions, or anyone wanted to raise a hand to ask anything? Because we're probably due to finish up. Rebecca, did you have any final thoughts?
No, I don't. If not on kind of the presentation or the material. If anybody wants to get hold of me and ask me any questions afterwards, you can find me on LinkedIn, Rebecca Morley, as you know, and Instagram. I am Rebecca Morley Coaching. Don't put a lot on there, but feel free to DM me. I had one private question off a lady called Emma Jane. I will try and get back to you somehow. Oh, I'll ask Michelle for your details.
Well, if you're happy, I can copy you into the roundup email. So I'll blind copy everyone else, and I can copy you so everyone's got your email address.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. Yeah.
And then I can include in that any links that you want to share with everyone, Rebecca. I can in the follow-up mail. Brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for those of you who'd like to join more of these sessions, we've got another one next week, which is on how to communicate in times of crisis. So how do you communicate and talk about your business sensibly? And we're doing that with a lady called Gabrielle Shaw, who runs a really interesting PR company that she works across the board, sort of luxury sector, hospitality, a lot of the sectors that have been really hard hit, in fact. And so have a look on our events page. You can register for that one. We'd love to have you there. But yeah, feel free to reply to the email as well. And what I did do, which might be a little bit late now in our last session, was I said if anyone did want to be connected with each other, they could just pop their email addresses into the chat box, and I could then share that with everyone afterwards. So if you would like to, I'll leave this open for a bit. If you want to be connected with everyone else, or you've seen someone's name on the gallery view here that you want to be in touch with, pop your email address in there and I'll share the chat, the text file of the chat with everyone.
Brilliant.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rebecca. That's amazing.
Thank you.
I'm going to do these exercises now because I haven't done them yet while I was trying to watch for questions. But thank you very much for joining us, everyone. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Hopefully you'll join us for the communication session. And Rebecca, enjoy your walk on the coast today.
Thank you.
Very envious. Brilliant. I'll send a roundup email later today. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.